On March 19th of 2024, 911 operators would get a phone call from Heath Smiley. Heath Smiley would explain that a girl named Carly tried to kill him after killing her mother. When the first officer arrived on the scene, he would note that the front door was locked, but he could hear somebody screaming on the inside. That person would later be identified as Heath Smiley. Heath would fall to the ground as he described to the deputy that Ashley Smiley was dead inside the residence. He would describe Carly to the deputy as he explained that Carly had ran out the back door after shooting him. Heath would also explain that during the shooting he did in fact sustain a bullet wound. At this point, the officers would search the Smiley residence and they would in fact find Ashley Smiley laying on her back in Carly's room with a body towel draped over her face. The officer would then lift the towel to discover that Ashley had a bullet wound in her head. Carly would eventually be found and caught and taken into custody by officers. Carly would then be charged with the murder of her mother, Ashley Smiley, and the attempted murder of her stepdad, Heath Smiley. Before Carly's court date, the judge wanted both sides to present all their evidence during discovery and not for it to be used as an abuse technique during the trial. It would be discovered that at the time of the shooting, Carly had been seeking psychological help. Due to this, Carly was ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluations prior to her trial date. And during the hearing, the judge would ask both the state and defense attorney for the report that the doctor did during their mental evaluation on Carly. Prosecutor Caitlin Newman brought to the stand Dr. Amanda Guglielmo, who performed a evaluation on Carly. The doctor stated that she could only perform a competency evaluation on Carly and not a mental evaluation. The doctor testified that she believed that the medications that Carly had been prescribed prior to the murders had some form of relevancy to Carly's mental state at the time of the alleged offense. Carly's lawyers, Bridget Todd and Kevin Camp, had also gotten a doctor to evaluate Carly's mental health. Unfortunately, at the time of the hearing, Dr. Mark Webb's evaluation on Carly had not been completed, but the defense promised that once the results were in, they would give them to the prosecution. This was beginning to sound like a willful attempt to obtain a tactical advantage, a complete bushwhacking to hold the report until 10 days before, and that is not the purpose of the insanity defense. If she is truly insane or truly under the influence of these drugs, why hold it until 10 days before the trial? It looks bad in front of the jury. The defense explained that they were not intentionally withholding evidence from anybody, but the judge stated that there was a deadline for any discovery to be admitted, and if it wasn't done by that deadline, then it would not be heard in court. The purpose of discovery is to reach the truth. I'm going to be frank. If this young lady is suffering from a mental defect or illness or medication, then she should be set free. But if she's not, then that is a perilous argument. The jury is going to have to make this decision. Both sides have been discussing a plea deal, which the judge also put a deadline in order for the court to accept. But ultimately, Carly was the one that rejected a plea deal to serve 40 years in prison. The trial for Carly Gregg had been set, and the DA had stated that Carly Gregg is evil, and that's not easy to say, but the truth of the matter is that sometimes evil comes in young packages. Prosecutor Newman would explain that Carly had a secret life that nobody knew about, which included a boyfriend and social media accounts. She explained that on the morning of March 19th, that Carly and Ashley would drive to Northwest Rankin High School together, which is where Carly was a student and Ashley was a teacher, and everything was fine. But during school, Carly had gotten into a really bad fight with her friend and cussed this friend out. And this friend, so concerned with her marijuana use, decided to send an email to her mother explaining her double life. And Newman said that this friend felt the need to intervene. Newman would explain after Carly and Ashley returned home around 3:30 p.m. that day that Ashley would immediately go to Carly's room and take out some items, which were later identified as 4 boxes containing vape pens. At that same moment, Carly would go to her parents' bedroom to retrieve the pistol that was located underneath the mattress. The prosecution showed the surveillance footage in court that showed the moments where Carly left her parents' bedroom with the gun behind her back as she proceeded to head to her bedroom where she shot her mother 3 times. Newman explained that 1 bullet was removed from Ashley's brain and another bullet was removed from her neck. Those bullets would then match the ballistics from the gun that Carly used in the shooting. Carly also tested positive for gunpowder residue. Carly would then come back into the kitchen and use her now deceased mother's phone to contact her stepfather, Heath. The prosecution would state that Carly would then text a friend only known as BW, and she would tell her friend that she needed them to come over and that it was an emergency. When BW arrived at the Smiley residence, Carly asked them had they ever seen a dead body and were they squeamish around dead bodies, and BW said no. So Carly then proceeded to show BW her mother's dead body. Carly would then tell BW to wait outside because Heath was going to arrive soon. BW would state that they heard Heath arrive and then they heard 3 gunshots before seeing Carly run out of the house. The prosecution would then bring Heath to the stand. Heath would tell the court that when he entered the kitchen door, a gun went off in his face before the door was completely open. Heath explained that everything was a blur because it happened pretty fast. He stated that the gun went off 2 more times after that, but he managed to get his hand on the gun after the first shot. That from about a foot away, Carly shot him, and one of those bullets grazed his shoulder. She was screaming out of her mind, scared, like she had seen a demon or something. Heath would explain that he was eventually able to wrestle the gun away from Carly, but Carly ran away so fast that he knew he just wouldn't be able to catch up to her. He explained that even though Carly had done a horrible act, that he still cared about her. He even mouthed "I love you" to her in the courtroom. The defense would tell the courtroom that this is not a case about whodunit. It was clear that Carly was the one who murdered her mother on March 19th of 2024. This is a case about why. The defense stated that Carly suffered from mental illness like many members of her family. The defense would call Dr. Clark to the stand to testify about Carly's mental state. Dr. Clark stated that Carly was suffering from bipolar disorder. Dr. Clark, who was a child psychologist, explained that Carly was suffering from depression and had been given medication that was making her feel numb. The doctor would continue to explain that Carly was experiencing hearing voices, which was getting worse prior to the shooting. He testified that parts of her past had been a contribution to her health and behavioral issues, including the death of her sister at 4 years old. Dr. Clark concluded that Carly wasn't able to understand the nature of her conduct and she was unable to appreciate the difference between right or wrong during the time of the incident. The courtroom would be showed Carly's journal, and inside Carly's journal she would write her 5 beliefs, which included there is no God, heaven and hell are false, and writing one's destiny. But the prosecution focused on the last 2, which were you don't need a family and that it's okay to be evil. She also wrote that I choose fire. It's powerful, beautiful, and deadly. These are traits I desire, so I choose fire. The defense state that Carly's journal entries paint a very clear picture of a child who is mentally unwell who is repeatedly detailing how much she was struggling. Dr. Pickett would read an entry from the journal where Carly expresses that she hears voices. He said that he was highly skeptical of that, seeming Carly had never complained about it to her mental health providers previously. It seemed theatrical in making light of something. Patients who really suffer from this are haunted by it. It is quite torturous for them. They do not trivialize it. Dr. Pickett would state that he did not believe Carly was suffering from bipolar disorder and that in his professional opinion, Carly was sane at the time of her mother's death. He would describe Carly as having psychiatric traits and narcissistic tendencies, describing her actions as diabolical, which is something that he doesn't take very lightly. He states that she is very likable and charming, and that during his interview with her, he even liked her, and that's not something that he likes to admit to. The court would finally hear from Rebecca Kirk, the counselor who was treating Carly weeks prior to the crime. The day before the crime was actually the last session that Rebecca had with Carly. Rebecca noticed that 7 days before the crime, Carly had chopped her hair and given herself bangs. On February 14th, mere weeks before the crime, Carly told Rebecca that she planned on reading Crime and Punishment. Crime and Punishment is about a person who, in Rebecca's words, is very intelligent and has this obsessive thinking of planning to murder a woman. The character eventually comes to the conclusion that extraordinary people are entitled to kill others for the good of society. And the main character does eventually end up killing a woman with an axe. The character would then be sentenced to 8 years in a labor camp and deemed insane. When he was at the labor camp, he was unrepentant. He did not think he did anything wrong and thought the woman deserved it, Rebecca said. Rebecca would then go on to describe Carly as a very gifted student and patient who received a lot of affirming in life due to her intelligence. She would state that Carly was proud of that and she had a genuine love for learning and she was gifted. That was very clear. She stated that though sometimes when you are gifted and different from others, it can feel a little bit isolating and lonely. The defense stated that Carly never got around to actually reading Crime and Punishment. Both the state and the defense would describe Ashley Smiley as a loving mother whose world revolved around Carly's. Carly was the love of her mother's life, the state and the defense both stated. Prosecutor Newman would urge the jury to not allow Carly to have any possibility of leaving prison. She stated, "Ladies and gentlemen, she is dangerous. She may look like a little girl. You may have said, 'Oh, little sweet Carly,' but she's not sweet." Prosecutor Newman asked the jury to sentence Carly to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She states that it's actually scarier for her not to know why she murdered her mother, stating that if we don't know why, who's to say it won't happen again? In the defense's closing argument, they stated that there's no dispute that Carly loved her stepfather and her mother, and they stated that Carly had no previous history of violent behavior prior to March 19th, and on that day, her actions shocked everybody that knew her and treated her. The defense stated that prior to the murder, that Carly had been haunted by voices, trauma, and mental health issues that led her to dissociate and black out. The defense asked the jury to find Carly not guilty by reason of insanity. After deliberating for about 2 hours, the jury came back with a verdict. The jury would find Carly guilty, and it would only take another 30 minutes for the jury to come to an agreement to sentence Carly to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Carly will serve 2 life sentences for the murder of her mother and the attempted murder of her stepfather, and then an additional 10 years for tampering with evidence. The last charge comes from Carly taking the camera that was located in her kitchen and putting it in her fridge. The defense had a 9-page motion with more than a dozen reasons for why Carly did not receive a fair and impartial trial. Carly's lawyers expressed their concerns on whether Carly was even mature enough to understand the charges brought against her, make decisions regarding plea bargains, and participating in her own defense. No ruling has been made on the defense's motion yet. Carly Gregg is currently residing in the Youthful Offender Unit, which is a separate independent facility that is used to hold individuals under the age of 18 at the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility. And that is the end of today's video. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, be safe, Earthlings. Peace out.